from a middle class family. I've had the best of the convent education. I've been to one of the premier planning and architecture schools in India. I've been to done my doctorate from one of the top 25 universities in the world. But today, I thought I'll speak to you about what this education, not what this education has done for me, but what the unlearning that has followed this education has shaped my life. This has been through a number of innumerable backpack journeys, and that's why you see my backpack here. This is a small version. All over India and of course many parts of Asia. Each journey is very, very fresh in my mind and has taught me more than so many years in college and endless lectures that I've been listening. I wanted to share today some of these backpack journeys which I've been fortunate enough to experience through a lifetime of nomadic pursuits. My first backpack journey was in 1995. This was to a community, a very hospitable community in rural Madhya Pradesh, about a few 100 kilometers south of Bhopal, where I made this treacherous journey over 3 days and finally reached there. I had my classmate with me, and with great gusto we were there like NGO workers, trying to solve the problems of the world and saving humanity. And we started with all that gusto to ask for information, stories that we could build. But to our utter surprise, they had no stories to tell. They were a very happy, contented lot. And I was like, I've come all the way from Delhi. I want to hear stories that I can report back. And here I was with a community that was so satisfied, so happy. I was almost like pleading, please give me a story that I can go back and tell. Of course there was no water. There was a well dug by these people who had relocated them to this new site after a dam was being built. So that well was never got built. There was electricity poles in that colony, but obviously no wires. There were these Swiss cottages that the government had made them for, but obviously people prefer to live in their own style, in their own type of houses. And overall it presented a deserted look. They had kind of found their own little space where they were living their traditional way. All this was done to sort of feed an irrigation system that would then provide drinking water to the city of Bhopal. So back in Bhopal, we were rummaging through the files of the irrigation department and trying to find what really went wrong and how is it that this community is very contented, was apparently a community that was facing a lot of problems otherwise in text. And we found that all that money was spent for the wells, for the electricity supply and for all the other public utilities, but actually nothing got translated in practice. And I guess that was my kind of first lesson from this backpack journey that I took. That it's not just about acquiring knowledge and designing solutions sitting here in cold comforts, but it's actually the human dimension of our work, that ethical dimension we as professionals, as duty bearers, need to be reminding ourselves of every other time. Around the same time in 1998, if some of you may remember, there was a very severe cyclone that hit the western state of Gujarat in Kandla. Hundreds of people died and many more were injured. People lost their homes, their cattle, their whatever assets they had. And I was there along again with my backpack, trying to provide relief to these people, to the survivors. And while I was kind of interacting with them on a face-to-face basis, I realized that simple awareness, simple knowledge about how to make houses safe, just like putting a little J-hook on their roofs, could have actually saved their lives. They could have protected them from these fierce winds. And so there was I feeling very devastated that I as a professional, as a habitat professional, was failing in my duty if I was not able to save lives because my profession, my knowledge hasn't reached them. And this was, friends, my transformational lesson, so to say, where I realized that whatever knowledge we acquire as professionals needs to reach to people who need it the most. And that becomes our moral obligation. Moving on, just around the same time, back home in Delhi, I was working with this community which was living on the wrong side of River Yamuna, on the wrong side of the embankment. And you know, every year the river would be in floods and these people would get inundated. Their whole slum colony would get inundated. And you know, again, as NGO workers, we reached there, we tried to, you know, with all these solutions, the knowledge that I had about from satellite pictures of how the flooding takes place and how, you know, they need to be displaced, etc. And I, somewhere, you know, this whole formal education that I've been carrying with me was kind of giving me a sense of superiority, which I realized, of course, much later. That feeling of power and being, you know, thinking that, you know, I know something that these people don't know. And it was kind of feeding into my ego and building that kind of arrogance. So there I was with all this knowledge, with all this feelings of superiority and, you know, call it arrogance, there to help this community, to provide them solutions against this flooding problem. And so I went into the slum colony, spoke to the person in charge, and he was the community leader who had moved from Bengal and he was who had migrated to Delhi. And so initially he heard me out. He gave me some data that I wanted to sort of, you know, feed into my reports, and then made me sit next to him on this place of honor. He was a community leader after all. And then sipping tea and biscuits, he said thanks, but no thanks. You know. And I was again shocked. Certainly, I think I had incorrectly perceived the problem. And it so appeared, and it so turned out, that the problem of floods was something that they were very well aware of. Every year, floods were there, of course. The young volunteers in the community would go out and warn the people about the incoming water and higher water levels. And they would quickly pack up and move to a higher ground on the embankment. 15 days, 20 days of temporary dislocation and they are back into their slum colonies. But what the real problem was, fires. Being a slum colony and being home to many local garbage dealers, this settlement would catch fire almost every year on a regular basis. And the fire in this kind of colony would take minutes to finish the entire colony, which would take lives, of course, but also destroy all their assets, which they have been collecting through the year to be able to send that back home and hopefully move out of that vicious cycle of poverty. So for them, fire was a much bigger problem. And so it's so construed, and you know, we spent a lot of time discussing these, brought in whatever I knew about these issues, and in the end result, we ended up building a very interesting solution that perhaps I had not even conceived of when I went there in the first place. It was a community fire post built completely by the local community. It could solve the fire problem much before a fire tender could even reach that area. And the community would manage it. They would know where to rush for. There was a training that they carried out within themselves. They knew who would be those volunteers who are most of the time in the community. So everything was worked out in a very, very sophisticated manner, and perhaps the best solution that could have come out. Successive experiments like these, the one in Delhi, also in Gujarat after the 2001 earthquake, have taught me immense lot of things that I would have never picked up otherwise. In Gujarat, when we started working with this little village community in Patanka, they told us about how creative they can get about human potential in trying to discount the amount of effort that goes into building or rebuilding following the earthquake. And I realized that as a professional, I am not always the provider, but also actually a facilitator in such situations. Something that, again, helped me change my mind. About 7 years ago, in the western state of Rajasthan, there were unusual floods, if you remember. Floods are not common in this kind of area. In fact, these floods were happened after almost a gap of 200 years in this area. Again, I was on my backpack, going there as an NGO worker, wanting to sort of, save them and rebuild again. This time I had become wiser from all my previous experiences, and but then I had a new armament in my backpack. Guess what? It was the word climate change. So I thought I would now be able to confidently prevail over them with this newfound knowledge, and I would tell them something which they perhaps didn't know. Well, unfortunately for me, they were very stubborn and people there. So they challenged me with their own traditional wisdom and said, prove us wrong on this. And believe me or not, the amount of sophistication that I saw in the way they lived. For example, the walls of their houses were made out of mud with high insulation properties that could save them from extreme temperatures. The houses were round in design, so any sandstorm or fierce wind, which is a very common feature in that part of the country, wouldn't stay. In fact, it would flow through. And the roof structure, which was made out of a common weed that is found in Rajasthan. Wheat is available free, has very high surface tension, so it would allow the water to flow out, but it would allow the hot air inside the house to actually circulate in and out. So extremely sophisticated, perhaps no engineer could have thought of. And so an intense round of negotiation happened. We actually broke open the entire design, brought in all these other knowledge that I was carrying with me, and then tried to marry that with the traditional wisdom that these people had. And what ended up was a fantastic design which we felt was far more superior than any of us could have ever thought of. This was a negotiated settlement between the so-called knowledge bearers and those community people who had much richer traditional sense of their own environment. And of course, from this firepour experience in Delhi to one in Gujarat and many more in between, I really learned my third very important lesson, and that was that sometimes to learn, you need to unlearn. And that is very important for us as professionals. It requires sometimes an internal negotiation that you need to do with yourself. But the net result, I can assure you, is lethally good. Last month, friends, I was in Fukushima in Japan. This area, if some of you remember, was hit by this triple disaster in March 2011. A nuclear disaster, an earthquake, and a tsunami. Many thousands of people lost their lives, but many more were exposed to nuclear radiation. When I met people there, they were very angry. Angry because they felt and they had been deceived by the system which always boasted of, and for us as humanitarian professionals, we always looked at Japan as the best prepared country. So here were the ordinary citizens who felt deceived by their own system and extremely angry that this could have happened to them, and they felt cheated. What I wanted to say here was this is the nature of the disasters of tomorrow. Challenges are going to become very, very complex for us. And if you really want to see this world to become a better place, I guess we will have to carry on to these backpack journeys. Conclusion, my friends, and this comes really from me, the nomad here. First, go on, get all the degrees you can, the best possible, the bachelor's, master's, doctorates, postdoctorates, whatever you want to get. Go for whatever profession attracts you. Please live your dreams. But every once in a while, and this is my request, take this backpack journey to the remotest parts of the humanity. Go out and check, reach out your profession, your knowledge to the people who need it the most. Then, and only then, I guess you will become a true professional, a person of ability, character, and wisdom. My backpacking, as you must have realized, hasn't stopped. It's here right now. Lately, I've been taking my 12-year-old son to these journeys, hoping to give him a head start. But I guess there's a lot more that needs to be done, and many more backpackers have joined. So I guess this journey will go on. Allow me to just end this by a few words of this legendary musician, Bob Marley, who said famously, "Though the road has been rocky, it sure feels good." Thank you.